started the Institute of Asset Management in 1994 as a group of passionate individuals, literally around the table, saying, look, we have a lot in common, even though we're from different industries. And for the first few years, it was like a club of common interests with people with a bit of passion. And then it became clear that we had to be a little bit more serious if we were going to get our organizations to take the subject seriously and see the big prize that we could see ourselves was possible. So it was at a conference a bit like this that a group of us, 5 of us, in the evening, late one night, around several beers, decided that actually we needed to develop a checklist that was independent of the type of asset and independent of the public or private ownership or the organizational structure, industry sector. That was what was always needed to be done for asset management. And we decided that we would not do it just as a publication from our little institute. We needed to have a structure that guaranteed objectivity and the peer review process, the validation process. So we approached British Standards for that. And British Standards have this model called a PAS, a publicly available specification, with rules of language and structure and consultation and validation. And so we adopted that, and in collaboration with British Standards, we developed what then became number 55, publicly available specification.
Okay, great.
I was lucky enough to be in the position of coordinating, but really it was the combination of quite a lot of people working very hard to do the big revision we did of PAS 55 in 2008. We had over 1,300 proposals for refinement to sift through and revise and accept and deconflict and find the best of the best. Okay? So when it came to the next cycle of revision, that was the obvious time to say, this thing is no longer just an agreement of good practice. It probably needs some bigger teeth. And that's when we made the proposal to ISO in Geneva, and they accepted the PAS 55 as the basis for an international standard. Now, it is very, very hard to create the right compromise for an international standard. So we knew at the beginning that it may not be as clear and crisp as we were able to develop in PAS 55, but it would have a wider applicability. So, for example, PAS 55 is physical asset centric, but not physical asset limited. So it can apply it to the human factors and the financial assets as well. ISO 55000 is for any type of asset from day one, although in the small text, particularly suitable for the management of physical assets. And making that migration inevitably means that we had to use more generic language. We had more time to explain to different cultures and industries. So there's a certain slight lowering of the degree of ambition defined in ISO 55000, but much wider applicability. That is the compromise. It also made some very good advances, better than PAS 55, in putting some real demands on the organization to understand their context and their direction and the role of good leadership. And the model that is built into 55000 is now the new standard for all management system standards. And so all the other management system standards like ISO 9000, 14000 and the new version of 18000 that will come out next year are all being restructured to map exactly onto the same titles and layout as 55000. So they will be much more integratable, which means that organizations can have a single integrated management system. That is a big step forward compared to having something for asset management, something for quality, something for environment that is managed independently. The Woodhouse Partnership, TWPL, is a slightly unusual organization. We are actually having our 20th birthday party next week.
Okay.
But we started out as a group of grey-haired guys from industry trying to stop the short-term habits of temporary enthusiasms by practical experience of what works and how to join it up in a case-by-case personalized way. So we hate being called consultants because consultants tend to preach a solution. And our style is to say, look, every single organization has to have its own solution. And our role is simply to provide some grey hair about works in practice and how to combine stuff to be sustainable. So what we have is something which is growing very fast, a subject of asset management. And we are lucky enough to work with some of the best international companies in the world. And we are seeing, particularly in the Latin American market, a real hunger for this. So we are making Latin America a big priority for our group. I only have 35 guys who are, every one of them, at least 20 years in industry. And we are currently working in 27 countries.
Great.
All right? But of all the regions in the world, I would say that the Middle East and Latin America are the ones that are making the biggest demands on our time and attention. And I have to say, of the two, I most enjoy coming to Latin America because of the welcoming arms we get here. And also having seen the rate of change that is possible. People have a real sense of can-do attitude here. And although there's lots of bureaucracy and frustration and corruption, other problems, actually when you get down to the real plants and the real people and their desire to make things better, it's fantastic. So we are building infrastructure here. We have an operation in North America. Almost certainly we'll be building infrastructure to support locally here. We already have 4 major clients in Colombia. We are working in Chile, we are working in Ecuador, working in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil. So the whole of this sector is clearly an emergent force in good asset management. I'm looking forward to seeing some real good case studies come out over the next 2 years. I think the main barriers to implementing these sorts of standards, or rather the main barriers to being better at asset management, because that's really what we're talking about, is the cynical model of people protecting their own patch. The silo behaviors are very deeply ingrained. There are a lot of people who have a vested interest in not changing. And so we have to give them a bigger prize to collaborate than they have for not changing. And so that's a really subtle thing. Every organization will have a different hoja de ruta, a different way forward of solving the practical problems to build the credibility of tackling the bigger problems. And the bigger problems are nearly always human factors, but they're also the biggest prizes if you get them right. So quite often you have to tackle some technical mangos bajitos to prove that it's worth trying to find a plan for cropping all the mangoes of the whole tree. Okay? And that is an iterative process. It's an organic process. It's not a predefined, follow step 1, then step 2, step 3. And most people want a formula. They're looking for a model they can copy and copiar y pegar. And that does not work in asset management. There are a lot of big consultancy companies selling a model of good practice in asset management. And I guarantee that will be another temporary enthusiasm.